Well, looky what we got here. It's an old Marshall Superbass. The owner thinks it's a 1974. So far, that's looking pretty likely. We'll take a look inside in just a moment. He already took the knobs off to clean those with some naphtha, and they're in a bag with some new tubes. We'll get there. He does not know what the internal condition of the amp is, and at this point, neither do I. But externally, this is looking really promising. Let me flip this around. All right, looking good from this side as well. Music World, Tallahassee, Florida. The impedance selector switch is all foobar with just a bit of wire in there that's rusting away. We're going to replace that with a modern switch with the adapter plate. I've shown that in some other recent Marshalls. It's got a grounded power cable that's probably functional, but not very good condition. We'll probably change that out. The general plan, after speaking to the owner, is once we see what the internal condition is like, if this thing is more or less pristine, we're just going to restore it. It's going to be a Superbass. If it's been messed with, if things aren't perfect inside, we're going to make it closer to a Super Lead, or at least a little bit brighter, maybe not the full Super Lead. Regardless of what we do, this thing has 4 output jacks, and the plan is to put a dummy jack here and a master volume here, and just leave the 2 output jacks. And the original jacks that I remove will be returned with the amp in case someone down the line needs them. And everything will be non-permanent, no drilling into the chassis. So that should all be simple. Let's get these screws off and see what's inside. For anyone who's saying to themselves right now, oh my God, he's using a power tool on this old Marshall, counterclockwise at a low torque is fine. When the time comes and I put all this back together, I'll do that by hand. Okay, this is looking really promising. Replaced with 6550 tubes only. I can see and I could feel when I was taking these out that the 4 holes for the screws were pretty loose. The wood's just kind of been eaten away at over the years. So I will kind of help these out with bits of a wooden dowel and some wood glue so that when these go back in place before this goes home, it won't continue to loosen up. All right, original dailies. J4 is the date code. I imagine that's 73 or 74 because I can see here this was issued from the factory on the 29th of January, 1974, which makes this a very early 74. It's not pristine as far as, it doesn't have rust. It has minor pitting and minor corrosion. Yeah, pretty typical of the era, but it's in really good shape. Let me get this up on end and get these screws loosened and get this out. Actually, given the way this one's done, I'm going to tilt it carefully on its face and remove these screws so it cannot fall. The owner said that one of these screws was already off. It's in the bag. No big deal. I'll show you up close on this one that's more easily visible. This is a number 3 Phillips screwdriver because it's a large number 3 Phillips head screw. If this were a number 2 screwdriver, and there was any resistance, that would really mess up the screw head. That's very common in old Marshalls and other amps that use a number 3, because no one ever takes the time to find the right screwdriver. But it's really important. Now, I can also feel that this does not have the cage nuts on the chassis, so I'm having to hold the nut behind. And I'll take a look at whether I can get some new captive cage nuts in place, or whether I'm just going to have a hard time putting this back together when the time comes. Well, I've got a good selection here of metric and SAE sockets, and it's not any of these. It's kind of in between 12 and 13, and in between half inch and 15/32, or between 15/32 and 7/16, I don't recall. None of these work. None of them grab it. Some of them almost do, and that's usually a recipe for disaster. So I'm going to try to just start it with some pliers and hold my mouth just right. If I can get it started, I can then hold the nut with my fingers. Now that one's going to come out, and I can get the nut the rest of the way out with my fingers. Now for the tricky one. All right, I'm going to suggest to the owner that we put these away, because this is a non-standard thing, and rather than order a special tool from the UK, I can replace these with some new M6 screws. The screws might be M6, it's just a nut that's non-standard. Anyway, whether I replace this with a new screw or just replace the nut, something that you can actually get a modern tool in on, because it'd be nice just to reach in there with a half-inch or 12 millimeter socket and do what you need to do when you need to take this out. Anyway, no cosmetic damage caused anything. No screws were chewed up, and hopefully I won't have to deal with that again. So let me turn this back up this way and slide the chassis out. All right, carefully does it. I just kind of walk it out so I don't tear up the inside of the bottom of the cabinet or any sheet plating that's down there for shielding. Just kind of walk it out carefully. Plenty of time, all the time we need. On some amps, I'll tilt this up on its side, but this thing's heavy enough that I don't need to do that, that I don't want to do that here. I could, but this works just fine. Patience pays dividends. All right, this is overall in very good shape, with some notable strange exceptions. Let me show you some things. The filter caps need to be changed, not because of imminent failure, but because they're almost as old as I am. Though, as she would point out, they are in fact younger than my wife. But still, time to change these out. That's just a part and parcel of it. Same for the electrolytic caps here in the bias, but someone has done some really strange work on this board. It's probably for the best in that they snipped the old leads, bent the old leads up, and tack soldered new components to them. Some of them have little partial wraps, some of them are just tack soldered, which means that the bottom of the board is less likely to be messed up from things having been replaced incorrectly. Future Lyle here, interjecting this little bit of what the F that I found after watching the bits that I already recorded when I was editing. The jumper wire here to here, that's fine, but they jumpered from here to here. Now this is the B+ node. This is going to have, 400 to 500 volts positive DC. This is the bias. At this point, it should be negative 40, negative 50 volts DC. And when you jumper them together, not only will that kill output tubes, potentially damage your output section, it might explain this charring here on the bottom of the board. I don't know if you can see that, where you can see the lack of color there in the fiberglass. So I don't know whether someone did this and it burnt an existing trace, or whether that trace burned and someone put this back together and got it wrong. I'm not sure what the sequence here is, but I know that this is a very, very bad idea to tie your positive high voltage B+ node to your negative low voltage bias node. So take that for what it's worth. We will be making that change, and I sure hope the output transformer is okay. We'll find out. But I still need to go in here and do all this properly. And what's up with having the dropping resistors here? These should be 10Ks. I've not measured this yet. Anyway, it's going to be restored. And some things like here, this HT wire was going here. Looks like there's some damage to the board beneath in this area. I'll know more once I pull this board out and see what our options are, but I could probably make it prettier than that. But overall, aside from things like that, of which there are plenty, it's overall in good shape, and we'll change out that electrolytic as well. Now, as far as what this will be when it goes home, the owner said if it had been butchered, it's not quite been butchered, but it certainly needs a lot of help to turn it to the Super Leads spec as opposed to the Superbass spec. And I will talk to him after he sees this video. It would be kind of a shame to change out these Philip Mustard 100 nanofarads in the output section for the 22s just because Superbass versus Super Lead. There's probably some good compromise tonal range we can reach that retains as many of the original components as possible, making changes only where necessary. The difference between a Superbass and a Super Lead is a string of very small changes, and this is not one of the most critical unless you're really playing really cranked hard rock all the time and you really do want to have as tight a low end as possible, in which case you get a slight improvement from 22s. The 22s are still flat down to like 30 hertz. These are just flat pretty much all the way down. There are other places to reduce low end without losing original Phillips mustards. In a nutshell, we've got a combination of Pyre and Iskra original resistors. Some things here have been changed out. Not sure what period these are. These are not original to the amp, but they're not new. And a lot of mystery piggybacking. I'm not sure what someone was doing there. Anyway, I know we can make this prettier. And I expect we'll probably improve the ground scheme by eliminating this redundant ground here in the ground bus, moving some of the connections from the power stuff. I've shown that in other videos. I'll talk to the owner, get his okay. Do you want to have the original factory mistake with all the original factory noise, or do you want to have the good parts of the circuit while making some simple, notable improvements along the way? Earlier in the video, I mentioned how the impedance selector switch had been jumpered. Not the most trustworthy method, but it has worked, but time to improve this. This is just a better view of that. But overall, I think this is going to be a pretty easy thing to make wonderful again for a really long time to come. So I'll put this up, let the owner see it, talk to him, and take it from there. Until then, thanks for watching.